There you go.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our second mindfulness workshop. We have Vivian Hermes to lead us through a mindfulness eating experience. So hopefully you brought something to eat today. Okay. So Vivian, go ahead and take it away.
thanks, Jason. So welcome all. As Jason mentioned, we're going to be focusing on mindful eating today. So if you don't already have something, just a couple of bites, so 2, 3, I brought blueberries, a few pieces of nuts, anything that is like a single ingredient, so as to like work with as we move through the technique, it would be helpful. And I'm going to be going through a little bit of the definitions and setting it up. So if you don't have that, you can listen to me and also go get your food items. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness in general is the paying attention to your moment, your present moment experience with a sense of openness, curiosity, and a willingness to be with whatever comes up, whatever the experience is. And so to that, it could be pleasant, it could be unpleasant. We're just opening ourselves up and getting curious about what we're experiencing. It has a lot of different definitions depending on the technique you're using and what framework you're in, but really they all contain the same sort of elements. That is, there's an intentional awareness. Either it's focused on one thing. For example, when we did the last time we met, it was on breathing. So you're focusing on anchoring into one aspect of your experience, or there is also practices in kind of opening up your experience more widely to whatever is coming in through your senses. It's also experiential. That is, you're tuning in to the senses and focusing your awareness on one particular area or multiple areas at the same time. There's also that sense of curiosity in the definition that we use at UCLA, but there's always this inquisitiveness, and that's because when we're in a state of curiosity or inquisitiveness, we're in a neutral state. We're kind of at zero. It can go in any one direction, and that helps us open up. And obviously, we can only do it right here, right now, in the present moment. So what mindfulness is not, it's not clearing of the mind. I know a lot of times when we see the images of people practicing mindfulness, they look very serene. Maybe they even have a smile on their face. They look very calm. They're sitting in a pretzel shape that, you know, for a lot of us probably look feel pretty uncomfortable, but they're looking like they're having the best time of their life. But really what's going on is this consistent coming back to that focal point, that anchor, as the mind is wandering, because the mind is always going to be processing information, reaching for novelty, doing all sorts of things, which is to be expected. And this training is one of helping it settle to some extent so that it can focus even for a split second. Sometimes you can't really even keep it on the focal point for more than a second, maybe if you're lucky 2 or 3 seconds, and then it wanders off. But the mindful moment is when you bring it back to the anchor. It's not about being on autopilot. So a lot of times when we're moving through our experience in our day-to-day, you know, how many of you have like driven from your home to school or to work and you didn't even realize how you got there because your body knew what it was doing and it was paying attention to the road, but there was an autopilot that was coming into play. Mindfulness is not that. It's also another piece that kind of gets confused with it is that it's also has a component of relaxation. Now, relaxation might definitely be an experience you might have, and a lot of people do report feeling more relaxed when they meditate because you are sort of collecting your mind, collecting your emotions, collecting your physical sensations. But a lot of times, if we're opening up to our experience, we're actually opening up to the pleasant, the unpleasant, and sometimes it's not particularly relaxing, especially when our mind is wandering and then we're bringing it back and wandering and bringing it back. It might feel almost like a struggle, but really it's that tending to the experience and bringing it back. That's the mindful moment. That's where I hope that eventually we can develop some a sense of gratitude for that mind wandering, because that was sort of the equivalent of doing a rep. I was sharing with one of my students that, you know, when you go to the gym and you're doing weight training, you don't show up and say, okay, you're standing in front of the weights and you're like, all right, I'm just going to flex my muscles like this, right? You need to actually pick up the weights and lift. And that moment where your mind wanders and you bring it back, that's almost the equivalent of picking up the weight and lifting. So you want to be gentle with yourself when your mind wanders, because that moment when you figure it out and you come back, that's actually the big moment of accomplishment. One thing I wanted to clarify about our schedule, we are going to move up the mindful thoughts session on May 4th up to May, it's going to be on May 4th. We had scheduled it for May 11th, but due to some scheduling conflicts, I need to move it up. So just to let you all know about that. Okay, so diving into what is mindful eating. Just like anything else, because our body knows what to do with the whole ingestion process of putting food in our mouth, chewing, moving it side to side, salivating and swallowing, there's a sense of autopilot that arises when we eat. How often is it that we actually just eat? Not sitting there contemplating about what we're going to do next, or maybe even planning our next meal, even though we're having this now, or even to the point of like we're already anticipating our next bite. So often, and that presents itself in when you're eating, you're holding your fork or your spoon, and before you're even done with the bite that's in your mouth, you're already moving in, or you're holding onto the spoon or fork, ready to put one more bite into your mouth. So mindful eating has two components to it. It's just like every other mindfulness technique or exercise, there's a quality we can bring to preparing and eating our food, a quality of being present for whatever's arising. And there's also the aspect of it being a practice we can do, that is how we're ingesting the food, how we're nourishing ourselves in the moment. So the mindful eating practice we're going to do has two parts to it. The first one, we're going to reflect on the ingredients. We're going to think about and reflect on their evolution, their origin, all the elements that came in play for it to be here right now in front of us for us to consume. We're going to think about the people that were involved. And as we kind of open ourselves to that, you're going to realize just how many lives have touched this, in my case, blueberry. The actual mindful eating part is when we bring, and I'll be guiding you through the whole process, but it's when we bring our full awareness and presence to the actual act of eating. And that is going to be, we're going to touch into looking at our food, our tactile sensation of touching it, the smell of it. And, you know, some of these might be there in more present and more vibrant than others. Some of them might be very subtle. The taste of the food, of course. And then we're going to also tap into and notice the ingestion process. So yes, how we're salivating, how our mouth just knows how to chew. It knows when to move the food from one side to the other side. And the tongue knows not to get in the way, and it helps move the food. The swallowing, there's an instinct that we're ready to swallow. So we're going to tap into all of that. So with that, I invite you, I'm going to start with just settling in, because that was quite a lot of information. So I invite you to stretch up and settle in. Take a couple of deep breaths here. You can even sigh on the exhale. Notice your feet planted, your sit bones planted on the seat. where your hands are settled. If you've already arrived, you really feel like you're here, allowing your breath to go to its natural rhythm. If you still feel a bit scattered and removed from this space, taking a few more deep breaths. I invite you now to pick up one of your pieces of food. Just begin to reflect on what came, what was involved in bringing this to you. So you can start with the fact that there was an intention of a farmer or a conglomerate, a lot of times, to grow this ingredient, and nature took its course in providing rain and sunshine, soil and fertilizer, wind. There are people that tended to this ingredient. And those people also relied on being nourished, being clothed, being housed. There were the people that ordered these, this ingredient, the buyers, the stores that stocked it, the roads on which it was transported. So I invite you to think about, these are all just suggestions. I invite you to think about all the elements, human, natural, that came into bringing this piece of food in front of you in this moment, including your own occupation that afforded you the resources to seek it out. I invite you at the same time to reflect on any other elements that maybe my description didn't catch. There were so many causes and conditions involved in bringing this blueberry into being, this nut, this piece of fruit. What else came into play? And from here, I invite you to begin to take in visually this piece of food. It's got color, it's got shape, it's got texture, it's got temperature. Move it around in your hands. Notice how it shifts. Notice how it catches light, areas of dark and areas of light. You can also notice if there's anything arising inside of you, maybe anticipation to just eat it. Is there a little more saliva building up in your mouth? Noticing any scent, if it has any smell. Now pressing it against your lips, noticing temperature, noticing any sort of texture you might be experiencing without putting it in your mouth and noticing what that does inside of you. You begin to salivate more. Is there maybe even a little bit of impatience arising? Like, let's get on with it. And when you're ready, I invite you to put it in your mouth and notice what that does without beginning to chew. Putting it in your mouth, what happens then? And then when you're ready, when you feel you can begin to chew to really experience what's happening. Begin to chew. And in that, start experiencing the flavors again. Now there's additional textures. Again, the temperature is going to be shifting. It's going to be mixing with saliva, noticing how you're chewing, how long it's taking. Trying, if you can, extending the chew. Maybe if you chew longer than you usually do. And then once you've completed that, again, doing it at your own pace, I'm going to give moments of silence for you to do it, but taking another piece and walking through again that experience of reflecting on, are there any other pieces, elements, people that I didn't catch on that first pass of reflecting on this piece of food? And then when you're ready, noticing all of its textures again, any smell, taking in its colors, putting it in your mouth, chewing it at your own leisure, and experiencing that second bite. Noticing if there's any shift in the anticipation. Does it taste as vibrant, as vivid as that first bite? Noticing how you feel at the end without moving for a third bite yet, but just when you complete this cycle, noticing what that feels like, especially compared to that first cycle. Now we're going to do it one more time. Picking up another piece. reflecting on its origins. Do any emotions arise? Maybe there may be gratitude. Maybe there's also concern if you think about the laborers. Just reflecting on any emotions that might be here. Now taking it in with all your senses. What does it smell? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And when you're ready, taking the bite, again, offering your full presence to that bite. Noticing how it moves, how it changes from its original texture, how it gives way to the chew. When does your instinct to swallow arise? And when you're done chewing, allowing it to settle, maybe even notice the swallowing as it goes down. Maybe you can even sense how far you can connect your awareness to the bite, how far down you sense it. Now checking in with yourself, noticing what you're feeling right now. Are there thoughts arising around this practice or around any peace that you experience in those steps? What's the state of your mind right now? Is it happy? Is it curious? Noticing what emotions are here. And there might be a combination of emotions. Are you feeling satiated? Or did this bring up your hunger? Is there gratitude? Is there joy? Is there sadness? We're just opening ourselves up to our experience. There might be a combination arising all at the same time, and that's fine. Just noticing. Now shifting your attention to your body as it's seated. Maybe it's standing, whatever posture it's in without shifting it. Noticing how it feels. Are there areas of tension, areas of softness? Maybe you feel different sensations in different areas. So there might be areas that are tingling, throbbing, tickling. Maybe you sense movement in and around your stomach. noticing how the body feels in this moment. So, in a moment, we're going to shift back into the presentation, just being really gentle with yourself as you shift your awareness, seeing if you can maintain some flavor of the awareness, staying connected to your body, taking a deep breath and exhaling, gently, softly opening your eyes if they were closed, taking a moment to stretch or move if that feels comfortable for you. So before we shift gears, I wanted to open it up to see if there were any questions about the practice itself. Okay, so I wanted to give a moment for people to get off mute, but maybe there are no questions, which is fine. Okay, so that's the practice of mindful eating. I invite you to practice with it any chance you get. As you can see, you don't have to do it for the entire meal. You can do it just for a few bites. It's actually really effective when you do it for the first couple of bites, in that you can really savor what's going on. It's usually those first couple of bites where we kind of move a bit fast through our eating, um, oftentimes when we're hungry. So if we can really stretch those first two, three bites out, can give our brain some time to catch up. Usually takes about 20 minutes for our stomach to signal to our brain that it's satiated. So the more we can extend the time that we're eating, the more time we give for our belly to communicate with our mind to say, okay, I'm full. So mindful that, mindful eating is one aspect. Um, there's also what I'm calling mindless eating. And one of the things I want you to reflect on as you consider incorporating this into your everyday, again, it doesn't have to be every single meal, it doesn't even have to be the full meal. And the the beauty of this practice is one that you can do even when you're eating with other people. So even though you're practicing mindfulness of eating, you don't have to change anything about where you are or who you're with, because everyone doesn't need to know what exactly you're doing. Obviously, you wouldn't necessarily pick up the piece of food in a more formal setting and start touching it, and, unless it is a finger food, and smelling it. But you can incorporate the various aspects of that practice, especially when you begin to ingest it and put it in your mouth. really being there for that bite and experiencing it in all the different flavors and all the different sensations that are arising as it's happening. As far as what to watch out for when we eat mindlessly, I invite you to reflect on in this moment, when is it that you eat? Because a lot of times we are fortunate enough to have access to quite a bit of food, and all sorts of food products, from natural single ingredient foods to heavily processed foods and everything in between. But I invite you to reflect on right now about when you eat, is it because you're hungry, or is there something else at play? And we can go through each one. So the first one is out of habit. A lot of us have been taught that breakfast is like the most important meal of the day, and that, or we've been taught that we need three full meals of breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and maybe two snacks if needed to break up our day. Now, habits come from a lot of different places, and whether it's we've been taught it, the other habit that we often carry over is, when we were young, we were taught to finish our whole plate, whether or not we were full. So something to reflect on is, am I actually satiating my hunger, or am I working from habits? And what are those habits that I default to? A lot of times also we eat because we're distracted, or we use it as a distraction. So we might be experiencing a difficult circumstance that's bringing up some challenging emotions, and we're trying to just numb ourselves from, or distract ourselves from, the circumstance that we're in. So we might reach for food in that circumstance. So thinking about, when do I use food as a means to distract myself? We also eat out of boredom. A lot of times we're not necessarily hungry, we're actually just bored. We're like, well, here's these delicious chips, let me take those up for now. This may or may not be applicable, but it's something to reflect on. Do I eat out of boredom? Again, one of those really difficult emotions that we can experience is anger. And as a way to sort of soothe ourselves, we might reach for food. And so, do I eat out of anger? And sometimes we eat out of loneliness. Okay? We're there by ourselves. Maybe we're sitting watching TV on our own, and we're like, yeah, we're just going to have this snack as we're doing this activity. That might even actually, the example I just gave might also fall under habit. Some of us, are used to snacking while we watch a TV show or watch a movie. Another thing that comes into play when we're eating, not necessarily out of hunger, is when we're tired or exhausted and we reach for particularly things that are sugary to kind of boost our energy. So am I eating because I'm exhausted or tired, or am I genuinely hungry? And another one that is, you might be surprised by, is that a lot of times when we're actually just dehydrated, we're actually thirsty, we mistake that for hunger. And that's just a biological reflex. So I invite you, like, if you feel hunger and you may have just eaten maybe an hour earlier, soon, it hasn't been a long time since you last had your meal, to having a drink of water, just plain water, and seeing what happens after a few minutes, whether that desire to eat is still there or not. So I just invite you to, again, recognize and think about, what are your triggers? Because these might not all be applicable to you. And begin to reflect on choosing a non-food activity that helps soothe, comfort, entertain, or energize you. So sorry about that. I thought there was a question in the chat. So a lot of these things might be things like going for a walk, taking a bath, right? Getting a massage, talking to a friend or family member, having a laugh, playing with your pet, right? There's so many options. So if we can set up a plan for ourselves, we are more likely to understand ourselves and meet it when the time comes. So really, the exercise going forward, if you want to practice with this, is to identify your triggers, actually write them out. Journaling is fantastic. And then like choosing an activity ahead of time. Okay, so when I experience this, if I experience, if I'm bored, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to pick up the phone and call a friend and family member and have a laugh or have a conversation and catch up. So meeting your triggers with some really wholesome, helpful activities and seeing if, putting that into practice and seeing if it's effective. So what are the benefits of mindful eating? The first is, the research shows it actually helps reduce stress. I, for a very long time, actually used to eat while standing. It was a thing. I couldn't stop myself from doing it. It was a habit that I developed in undergrad school that just stuck with me all the way through. It was so different to actually learn myself out of doing that and taking the time to just sit down with my food and eat it. It was a totally different experience because even though I wasn't necessarily thinking about the next thing, I realized that my relationship to my meal was shifting and that I wasn't just using it as I just need to nourish myself to get to the next thing I needed to do, but really it was an experience all on its own to just nourish myself. It wasn't in preparation or anticipation of the next thing that I needed to do. As we eat mindfully, it also helps to increase our awareness of hunger and fullness. So as I mentioned, people that eat mindfully tend to eat less just by virtue of the fact they're slowing down the process to give their stomachs enough time to communicate the information to the brain to say, I am satiated, I am full. You get to decide, do I really want another bite? So it's just at that point a matter of a decision where you can respond to it as opposed to just, this is the amount of food that I've collected in front of me, this is the amount of food I must ingest. It also tends to support better digestion. When we eat mindfully, we chew, we salivate more. Because we're chewing more, we liquefy the food. And so when making it much more easier for the body to absorb the nutrients as it moves through our intestines and our stomach and our intestines. So it actually has been shown to increase digestion and improve digestion. All of this supports weight stabilization in that, again, a lot of weight management can be impacted by portion control and recognizing when you're full. So as we do this, we can also stabilize weight. And you may have experienced this as we were practicing. When we are there for the food elements that we're ingesting, there's an increase in food satisfaction because you're able to really process and experience all the different flavors and textures. Everything that's going on actually enhances and makes the experience of eating much more vivid. It also has been found to lead to healthier food choices. And this speaks to the broader impact of mindfulness practice in that we always, when we approach our life in a mindful way, we actually come to each circumstance, whether it's eating, whether it's interacting with people, in a way that isn't reactive, it's responsive. So in that moment where you have options, you can approach it from a mindful eating perspective and just with full awareness, more often people reach for the healthier option than the less healthy option. So these are just some of the benefits of mindful eating. I wanted to, again, share some resources. The one is the one that I shared the last time, which was the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center, which is the center that I'm affiliated with. They have multiple options in various languages of audio files for different meditations of varied lengths. It's also an app, this UCLA Mindful app. The other piece that I wanted to share, and that's new related to mindful eating, is the UCLA Rise Center and they have a mindful eating series at this link. And I just invite you to check it out. It is brilliant because it shares both intuitive eating practices, which we didn't cover today, but very similar and has a lot of mindfulness components to it, as well as mindful eating. So I thought this would be a helpful resource to explore if you're interested in learning more about mindful eating. So with that, I just wanted to open it up to any questions or thoughts or experiences, reports.
Vivian, and all those things, the reasons why people eat, I actually talk about that in my health class.
Oh, awesome.
And it's, you know, it's studies have shown that everything that you mentioned is spot on, you know. So absolutely, you're absolutely correct. All those are reasons why people eat, you know. And the first one you mentioned, you know, everybody says that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? So time of day, you know, why we eat, right? You know, breakfast,
Yeah.
it's time to eat. In the middle of the day, it's time for lunch. At night, it's time for dinner. So
and you think about how different cultures eat. I mean, for me, that 3 meal a day thing was so tough growing up because I'm not one of those people that get hungry when I'm not hungry when I wake up. It takes me about 2 hours for my digestion to catch up with my activity, right? And so it was, but there was that messaging of like breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Breakfast is so I always felt like I was doing it wrong, but really I was listening to my body. This is what I need. So and you think about, you know, the different diets where, for example, you know, the Mediterranean diet has a really small breakfast, very big lunch, what we would even, I don't even know if you would call it a dinner, a very small snack in the evening of a whole food. So, you know, and whereas here, you know, what do we think of like dinner, and American dinner is like steak and potatoes and green, you know, it's got elements to it, right? Has a lot of food near the end of the day. So it's a really interesting thing to explore also your own cultural background, and is it really responsive to what your body is telling you? Do I really need to eat, or is it just it's my cultural upbringing that says so?
you're absolutely correct.
So thanks, Jason. Yeah, I hope that was helpful. And yeah, did you happen to have food? Did you partake?
I did. I had my little trail mix.
Yeah. Oh, it looks like Miriam. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you for all these. Indeed, I think we all need that I have a question. When we are eating out of stress, that is the second item that was distraction. So, but we are under the pressure. For example, we have a public speaking tomorrow, and all those pressure of what will happen, we have prepared enough, and whatever. I mean, like the only thing that gives us joy is a little bit of eating, not a little bit, I mean, eating what we like, to be a little bit distracted of all those pressure of men, of the minds, of the thoughts that we have. What do you suggest in those situations?
Yeah. So in those situations, so first of all, I'm not saying don't eat those things. For me, it's much more important that you stay aware of yourself. Like you just recognize, for example, okay, these are the elements. If I'm coming up against a deadline, it's going to be a stressful presentation. I want to soothe myself. I want it to be a response. I want it to be a conscious response to the moment. And more than likely, if it is, you might have one or two bites, a couple of bites of that thing, practicing in the way that we just did, but you're not going to sit there and eat, let's say, the whole chocolate bar. You might have one or two pieces. So this is not about withholding from yourself anything. It's about staying really conscientious and open and aware about how you're eating and when you're doing it and how much you're consuming. Is it meeting that need? Right? So I hope that was helpful. I hope I didn't present it in a way where it was like, don't eat these things. Potato chips are delicious.
Yeah,
They're
like
processed, yes.
yeah, when I open a pack of chips, I have to finish it. I have to finish it. Like I cannot satisfy myself with one or two pieces. I don't know why, but I really can't.
Yeah, in that case, no, I know this experience. I've worked with people who have this habit. And again, it's that whole so a couple of things. Slow down. That would be my first suggestion. Okay, really experience each bite, really be there for each. In this case, we're talking about chips. Okay, be there for that first one, experience it fully, give it a moment. In the same way we just did this exercise, take another bite, experience that fully, take another bite, and touch it. And if you still end up finishing that whole bag, eating that way, which is possible, I invite you to sit down and think about, and I'm assuming it's like the little bag of chips. It's not like the family size. So to reflect on, what is happening. Again, am I coming from a sense of habit? Because there's a point where, if you even noticed in those 3 cycles that we did, the vibrancy and the vividness of the actual chewing, swallowing, all the flavors that was going on, it gets dulled out. So usually your first and second bite are a very different experience than your 10th, 12th, 20th bite. That because the mind kind of lets go of the novelty of it, it's not grasping for it. Something else is stepping in that moment, having you continuing to eat it, even though it's not as vivid of an experience, it's not as intense of a flavor experience. And I just invite you to get curious about it. What happens at the 5th bite? What happens at the 6th bite, the 10th bite? And see, like, you might just end up choosing differently if you just stay really close to the experience and to the senses and how you're experiencing them in the moment.
Thank you so much. That was really, really helpful. Thank you.
Miriam,
Awesome.
another thing that I would add to that is, like, it's okay to eat because everybody's going to get that nervousness. But instead of maybe the chocolate bar or the bag of chips, maybe carrot sticks or something that maybe is a little more healthier for you. It's probably not going to have give you that same feel, but it's going to be better for you in the long run. So that's like one of the things that I talk about with my health classes is, one portion size. Like, people don't understand what portion sizes are. You go to a steakhouse and you get that 22-ounce steak. Well, you've just had enough meat for 2 days.
Wow.
So portion size is big, and also the choices of the foods that you eat. You know, every once in a while, it's okay to have some
Mhm.
chips, but if you need something that's and you know that that stress is going to cause you to want to eat, choose something that's a healthier option, and that might change your outlook or how your reaction to that stress. So that stress eating won't necessarily, you won't want to need to do that stress eating because you're not giving yourself that good chocolate bar. You know, carrot sticks are not as, you know, they're not exciting, not as exciting, right? So I would also think about like the choice of what you're eating.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I think, Jason, I have to have a session with you regarding because I have a challenge with my with my nutrition and my diet. I'm vegan and I'm constantly challenging with that. So thank you.
No
Yes.
problem.
Yeah. Stress is a big driver of what we choose to eat and when we choose to eat it, for sure. And I would second that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say like you shouldn't eat carrot sticks, but you know, yeah, or any, and that's the thing. It's like what associations we've made with healthier options. I was reflecting on the fact that, all advertising is set up because, for processed foods, it's got a particular vendor, person that, or a company that's producing that. And so it's developing advertising related to that. But you don't see very often, commercials for apples because there's so many different farmers and farms and companies that produce apples, for example. So what's our relationship to what we're taking in through our senses, through advertising, through marketing campaigns, and realizing that those are always going to be in the interest of the companies that are paying for those advertising. And you're not going to see the commercials for celery sticks, or which are just as delicious. And so we make these associations based on what we're being bombarded with when it comes to advertising. We decide, oh, carrot sticks are not as delicious as a hamburger, right? But that's not necessarily true. If we can bring our full selves to the experience of eating the carrots, the vegetables, the fruits, I mean, it's filled with flavors and colors and scents and smells that are just as complex as any of these other foods, if not more so. So I think that's another thing. I didn't talk about that. That would have taken us into a totally different realm of discussion, but it's something to really consider is how we're marketed to and what gets left out, and how we can bring that balance back for ourselves since it's not being offered to us.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivian.
Sure. So that's what I had, Jason.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody that attended. We were a little light today. I don't know if something else was going on campus, but hopefully people will be able to watch the recording. So Vivian, thank you very much once again. And then we'll do our next meeting, our next workshop will be on April 6th.
Yes.
Right, correct?
Where do you put the recording, Jason? Sorry, I missed that part.
Marion, when I send out the email of what we're offering for the week, I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.
Oh yeah, in that email, I remember now. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the link for the YouTube channel is, I always have that in there. So